Marcus Reed had dreamed of this land his entire life, a wide, golden valley where the hills rolled like waves under the morning sun. When he finally bought the old ranch, it wasn't just property, it was peace. After years of serving overseas and rebuilding his life from scratch, this was his quiet reward. Every morning, he walked the fence line with his coffee, listening to birds instead of gunfire. He built his own stables, fixed a barn, and planned to raise horses with local kids. But just beyond the hill, eyes were already watching him. The HOA neighborhood nearby, perfect lawns, identical houses, and one powerful woman didn't like what they saw. Before we dive deeper in 2-story, tell me, where are you listening from? And don't forget to subscribe and share, because tomorrow, I have got something special for you. Karen Drayton, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, stood on her porch with a pair of binoculars, her lips pressed tight. A black man, alone, owning that much land outside her control. It didn't sit right with her. To her, Marcus's peaceful ranch wasn't fitting the community's image. She whispered to her board, twisting her words, "He's bringing down property values." Within days, HOA chatter turned into an unofficial campaign. Karen had her eye on that land for years, and now, someone else was living her dream, a man she couldn't control. Inside the HOA clubhouse, fluorescent lights flickered as Karen gathered her followers. Maps spread across the table. Red markers circled Marcus's property. Her voice was sharp and commanding. "We can't have him there without oversight." Mr. Rowan, the HOA's vice president, shifted uncomfortably. Knowing this wasn't about rules, it was about power. But no one dared to challenge Karen. She proposed a plan that sounded lawful. Rezone the land access and secure the border with a safety fence. To most, it sounded like protection. But Marcus wasn't a fool. And soon, he'd realize, this fence wasn't just wood and wire. It was prejudice disguised as policy. Part 4. The fence rises. Marcus woke one morning to the roar of trucks. He stepped onto his porch, dust clouds rising from the road. A construction crew hammered posts into the earth, stretching metal fencing across his open pasture. His horses whinnied, trapped behind the sudden barrier. A sign went up. Private HOA, property, do not enter. Marcus walked to the nearest worker.com, but cold. "This is my land," he said. The worker just pointed toward the hill, where Karen stood with her arms crossed and that self-satisfied smile. That's when Marcus understood. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. By afternoon, Marcus tried driving into town, but the main road was blocked by a steel gate. 2 HOA guards stood beside it like sentries. One of them smirked, dangling a padlock key. "Sorry, sir, HOA, access only." Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He reversed silently, rage burning beneath the surface. That road wasn't HOA property, not legally, but for now, they controlled the entrance. He was fenced in like a trespasser on his own land. At sunset, he stood near that locked gate and made himself a quiet promise. This fence won't stand for long. Karen's white SUV rolled down the hill at dusk, headlights cutting through the dust. She stopped by the gate where Marcus waited, hands in his pockets. "You should have asked permission before building out here," she said smugly. Marcus's eyes didn't flinch. "Permission? To live free?" Her smile wavered. "You'll find it easier if you follow our rules." The air between them was electric, the silence louder than her arrogance. He stepped forward just enough for her to feel the weight of his words. "You built your fence, Karen, but remember, walls work both ways." As her car rolled away, the storm brewing over the valley finally broke, and so did Marcus's patience. Marcus's patience had limits, and the moment that padlock clanked shut on his gate, he reached it. The next morning, his truck rolled into the county sheriff's lot. He stepped out slow, the calm before the storm. Sheriff Mills, a broad man with gray in his beard and quiet eyes, listened as Marcus laid out the facts. No shouting, no anger, just proof. A few hours later, that patrol car rumbled down the HOA road. Karen and her committee gathered at the gate like guards of a castle. When Mills arrived, she smiled with forced charm. "Sheriff, we were only securing the area." Mills looked at the metal posts, the private HOA signs stabbed into county soil, and raised a brow. "Securing whose area?" Karen blinked, thrown off. Marcus said nothing, just handed over a folder of property deeds. The sheriff flipped through them, his tone dry. "Looks like you folks built your little fence on the wrong man's patience." Karen's grin faltered. For the first time, her confidence cracked. That night, Karen paced her spotless kitchen like a general planning a war. Her reflection glared back from the black granite counters. "He's trying to make us look bad," she muttered. Her husband stayed silent. He'd learned not to argue when she was in this mode. Karen grabbed her phone, dialing HOA board members one by one. Noise complaints, property standards. Let's make him regret moving here. By morning, letters started appearing in Marcus's mailbox. Violation for excessive animals. Violation for improper lighting. Violation for land obstruction. Each more ridiculous than the last. Marcus stood at his gate, flipping through the papers. His jaw tightened, but his face stayed calm. "You want a war?" he whispered. You'll get one, but it won't look the way you think. Days turned into nights filled with quiet revenge. Marcus set up his desk under the single yellow bulb in his kitchen. Maps sprawled across the table, cups of black coffee scattered beside land deeds and survey papers. He traced every line with surgical precision, one finger dragging along the road that connected Karen's HOA to the county highway. Then, he saw it. A small rectangular strip on the records, a public easement unwound. He dug deeper. Old county archives. Historical maps. The road Karen's community used every day ran over a sliver of land that had been foreclosed decades ago, and now it was for sale. Cheap. Forgotten by everyone. Except him. Marcus leaned back, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. You fenced me in, Karen, he murmured. But you just trapped yourself. The next morning, Marcus put on his cleanest shirt, loaded his truck, and drove to the county office. The clerk looked up from her computer as he laid down the paperwork. I'd like to purchase parcel 91B, he said calmly. She blinked, typing fast. That's the HOA access road. Sir, you sure? He nodded once. I'm very sure. A few signatures, a modest payment, and a faint metallic stamp later. The deed was his. The key detail that the HOA depended on every day now legally belonged to Marcus Reed. He walked out of the building, papers tucked under his arm, face expressionless, but his eyes, they burned with silent satisfaction. The same kind of satisfaction that comes not from vengeance, but justice. Morning in the HOA looked like any other, until it didn't. SUVs lined up at the exit, waiting for the gate to open. But the gate stayed locked. No guards, no key. Karen stomped out of her car, yelling, "What's going on?" One guard fumbled nervously with the chain. Ma'am, the locks are different. Someone changed them overnight. What do you mean changed them? Before he could answer, a county truck pulled up. Sheriff Mills inside, smirking faintly. Morning, Karen. Heard you're having road trouble. Karen's voice wavered. Who did this? Mills held up a document. Marcus's new deed. According to county records, this road belongs to Mr. Reed. Now, for the first time, the HOA queen went pale. Her voice cracked. That's not possible. From behind the open gate, Marcus appeared, key dangling from his hand. Possible, he said calmly, and permanent. That evening, golden light spilled across the valley. Karen and her board stood at the gate, helpless, watching as Marcus approached. He held the key with the same steady hand that once rebuilt engines and fences. Now it would rebuild balance. He slid the key into the padlock, the same kind that once trapped him behind bars of arrogance. Click. The sound echoed across the quiet hills like thunder. He turned the key slowly, almost ceremonially, and swung the gate wide open. Access is a privilege, he said quietly, not a weapon. Karen stood frozen, eyes wet, rage trembling through her fingers. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't shout. He just locked eyes with her once, then walked away as the sun fell behind him, free, unbothered, and untouchable. For the first time, Karen realized the man she tried to fence in now held the only way out. Karen's world started to crack, not all at once, but piece by piece. Emails flooded her inbox. Residents were furious. They couldn't get deliveries. School buses refused to enter the blocked road. Every message began the same way. Fix this. You said it was under control. Why can't we leave our own neighborhood? Karen sat at her desk, the HOA seal gleaming behind her like a mockery. Her perfectly arranged binders, rules, fines, property codes now looked like tombstones of her own power. She slammed her laptop shut and whispered through clenched teeth, "He can't win." But in that whisper, there was something new. Fear. Not fear of Marcus, but fear of losing control. Outside, HOA members gathered in the cul-de-sac, whispering. For the first time, they weren't whispering about Marcus. They were whispering about her. The next morning, Marcus watched from his porch as chaos unfolded at the gate. SUVs blocked the road, residents shouting, waving papers in the air. Karen, we can't get out. Deliveries are canceled again. You said you had this handled. Karen, red-faced, shouted back. We're resolving it. The sheriff is working on it. But she knew that was a lie. Sheriff Mills had already told her, you built a fence where you had no right. Now you deal with it. Inside her chest, anger and panic tangled. The power she'd used to control others was turning against her. Every eye that once admired her now burned with resentment. And standing far back from the crowd, Marcus leaned against his fence, sipping coffee. Calm as dawn, the storm now circling her instead. 2 days later, Karen appeared at Marcus's ranch. No guards, no clipboard, just desperation. She stood by the gate, smoothing her hair, voice trembling between pride and pleading. Marcus, we both know this has gone too far. You've made your point. What do you want? Marcus didn't step closer. He just looked at her through the fence. You want access? He asked. You'll have to pay for it. Her jaw tightened. How much? He slid an envelope through the bars. Inside was an invoice. The new HOA road access maintenance fee. $5,000 per household. Monthly. Karen's mouth fell open. You can't. Marcus cut her off. Softly, you taught me everything about fees, remember? Then he walked away, leaving her clutching the paper like it was burning her hand. By the end of the week, the HOA bank account was emptying faster than Karen could refill it. Members refused to pay her dues. They had to pay Marcus instead. Deliveries resumed only when his invoices cleared. UPS trucks, school buses, even garbage collection, all rerouted through his permission. The board tried calling emergency meetings, but attendance dropped. Mr. Rowan, the HOA vice president, quietly slipped Marcus a document one evening. The HOA's charter. Karen's finished, he said. They're voting her out. Marcus nodded once. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. Good, he replied. Let them rebuild something worth belonging to. But Karen wasn't done. Not yet. One night, under the hum of cicadas, she parked near the fence with bolt cutters in hand. The moonlight reflected off the silver blades as she whispered, "He can't trap me in my own neighborhood." She cut through the chain, sparks flying, but before she could finish, headlights flared. Sheriff Mills' cruiser rolled up slow. "Evening, Karen," he said, stepping out, arms crossed. "Breaking and entering, on a road you don't own." Her face crumbled. "It's mine," she screamed. "It was always mine." Mills shook his head. "No, ma'am, it belonged to whoever respected it, and that wasn't you." He turned her around gently, guiding her back toward her car. "Go home before you make things worse." Karen looked past him toward Marcus's ranch, dark, silent, unmoved. Her power was gone. All that was left was her pride, shattering quietly under the weight of consequence. A month later, the HOA signs came down. The meetings stopped, the fences dismantled. Marcus stood by the road he now owned, running his hand along the wooden posts he'd rebuilt. Children rode bikes down the lane again. Neighbors waved, not with fear, but with respect. Sheriff Mills stopped by one afternoon, leaning on his truck. "You ever think about joining their board now that you've got the road?" Marcus chuckled quietly. "Nah, I don't control people, Sheriff. I just remind them where their boundaries are." As Mills drove off, Marcus looked down the hill, the sunset painting the sky in fire and gold. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the small brass key, and hung it on a nail by his door. The symbol of his victory wasn't the land or the power, it was peace, and he'd earned every inch of it.
The HOA meeting room once gleamed with pride. A polished table, American flag in the corner, and Karen's framed President of the Year certificate on the wall. Now, the blinds hung half-broken, the fluorescent lights flickered like dying power. Karen sat at the head of the table, surrounded by silence. The room that once echoed with control now carried only whispers of regret. Mr. Rowan stood quietly, holding a stack of unpaid invoices for Marcus. "The road belongs to him now," he said softly. "We've lost access, funding, and half our members." Karen's voice trembled with anger. "He humiliated us. He humiliated me." Rowan sighed, his tone cutting through the air. "No, Karen, you humiliated yourself when you thought you could fence someone else's freedom." Her hands shook as she tore through papers, her own rules and fines scattered on the floor. The HOA that once ruled with fear had turned into ashes, and everyone knew it. Marcus didn't just buy the road, he transformed it. He hired veterans, local farmers, and small-town workers, people who'd been ignored or dismissed by HOA arrogance. Together, they paved a new, open road and built wooden signs that read, "Freedom Lane, welcome home." He added benches, small gardens, and painted murals of unity along the fences that remained. Kids rode their bikes freely again, elderly neighbors sat on porches they hadn't dared to decorate before. The same road that had been used to exclude him had become a bridge connecting everyone. And Marcus, calm, grounded, almost invisible, had become the silent symbol of change. He never gave speeches. He never gloated. He simply said, "Let peace speak for itself." Local media caught wind of the story. The headline was brutal. HOA president fences off wrong land, ends up paying to get out. Clips of Karen yelling, police arriving, and Marcus unlocking the gate looped on local channels and social media. Commenters mocked her arrogance. Memes spread. People laughed. Karen watched in horror from her living room, the same one that once hosted HOA meetings. Her trophies, her binders, her pride, all meaningless now. Her phone rang nonstop, reporters asking for comments. She ignored every call.
She stared out her window toward Marcus's ranch in the distance, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel powerful. She felt small. She whispered to herself, "I just wanted order." But what she had wanted wasn't order, it was control, and she had finally learned the difference. A few days later, Sheriff Mills visited Marcus's property. He leaned on his patrol truck, watching the kids play along Freedom Lane. "You know," he said, "I've dealt with fights over land all my life, but what you did here, it's different." Marcus looked up from his work, wiping sweat from his brow. "I didn't do it for them, Sheriff. I did it so no one else felt boxed in like I did." The sheriff nodded slowly. "You built more than a road. You built respect." As the sheriff drove away, the camera could linger on Marcus standing alone, wind pushing through the grass, his figure silhouetted by the golden light. A man who fought not with rage, but with reason. Late one evening, a soft knock echoed at Marcus's gate. Karen stood there. No fancy clothes, no makeup, just exhaustion written across her face. Her eyes were hollow, her voice shaky. "I came to say I'm sorry," she murmured. "You didn't deserve what I did." Marcus didn't look up immediately. He was fixing a section of the fence, the same one she once ordered to be built. "Sorry doesn't change the past, but it might change who you are next." She nodded weakly, tears tracing her face. "I lost everything, Marcus. My home, my job, my friends." Marcus finally looked at her, expression calm but firm. "You didn't lose it, Karen. You traded it for control. Maybe now you can start over without the fence." She turned and walked away slowly, leaving behind a dusty HOA binder on the grass. As the wind picked up, the pages scattered, rules, fines, and signatures flying free like paper ghosts of the power she once held. Spring came early that year. The valley bloomed again. The fences were gone, replaced with open trails, trees, and laughter. Marcus built a wooden arch at the entrance of Freedom Lane. Carved into it were the words, "Respect has no gate." Neighbors from both sides gathered for the ribbon cutting. Kids played tag across the fields. Even some old HOA members helped rebuild benches, embarrassed but humbled. Claire, Marcus's sister, smiled as she watched him quietly nail the last sign in place. "You turn their hate into hope," she said softly. Marcus smiled faintly, eyes on the horizon. "Nah, I just gave them a road. They decided where to walk." It wasn't revenge anymore. It was restoration. At sunset, Marcus climbed the hill overlooking the valley, the same place he had once stood, staring at the fence that kept him out. The wind was calm. The world was quiet. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the brass key, the one that started everything. For a long moment, he just held it, feeling its weight. Then he hung it on a tall wooden post facing the valley, letting the sunlight glint off it like gold. "They tried to lock me out," he whispered, "so I bought the lock and left the door open." Wind brushed through the grass. Then fade to crack as on-screen text appears. HOA put a fence around his land, so he bought the gate, because peace can't be fenced.